Income Tax 2020, Schedule C, Travel and Meals. Come in, relax with Income Tax 2020. Schedule C, Travel and Meals. When thinking about the Schedule C with relation to our income tax equation, we're basically thinking about the top line item here, knowing that we do have a separate schedule, Schedule C, which is a separate income statement in essence, having income and expenses. Bottom line of it, in essence, the net income of the Schedule C, then rolling into the top line of our income tax equation, where we then apply the above the line and below the line deductions to get down to that taxable income. So we're thinking about the Schedule C now and a categorization of the Schedule C, that being the travel and meals. So when we think about the Schedule C and how it rolls into the 1040, remember it has different effects or many different effects on the tax return, one being the net income, or basically the net amount at the bottom of the Schedule C, will roll into the Schedule 1, and then ultimately here to line 8. We might have an above the line deduction, or most likely will if we had income with relation to half of the self-employment tax, and above the line deduction to get to the adjusted gross income. Then we could have a qualified business income deduction as well to get down to the taxable income. So many effects of a Schedule C on the tax return. Here's a take a look at the Schedule C, where we have the income up top, the expenses down below. We're going to be taking a look at the items related to travel and meals. So travel and meals is our categorization we will be considering. Now note, when you think about travel and meals just in general, if you have the information in terms of an income statement from, say, a client or the accounting software, then hopefully travel and meals has been categorized appropriately already, and you simply have to be picking up the travel and meals and putting it into the correct line item. However, we know the items that are in, say, meals may be restricted. We might have like a 50% restriction and have to then therefore break out the meals versus the travel, because if it's in travel, which usually means like overnight type of activity, meaning you did business basically overnight is the general rule. If it's in the travel category and it qualifies for travel or business travel, it's more likely that we'll get the full deduction. If it's categorized as some categories of meals, which used to be basically meals and entertainment, which was a little bit more expansive of a category, then we might have some reduction of the amount that can be deductible, possibly, cut in half, having 50% of it to be deductible. So when we think about travel and how we're going to be categorizing travel, some of the things just from a practical standpoint to keep in mind is, what's qualifying as travel that can be deducted as travel versus possibly meals that could be somewhat restricted. Have we limited down the amount that can be deducted under basically meals, which used to be basically meals and entertainment, to make sure that we're coinciding with the regulations with regards to meals and entertainment? In other words, do we have things that might be like personal in the categories of travel, meals, and entertainment? If we are traveling basically for business and personal, how do we deal with that? Are we able to appropriately put in the travel that's going to be there for the business side of things, so we can take the travel related to the business? Also note that within travel, you could have some correlation or connection or some interplay between the car and auto expense as well, because part of the travel you might be thinking, well, part of it was driving, and then you got to be considering whether or not it's going to be deducted over here in the auto expense, and whether or not you're taking the actual deduction over here, or if you're taking basically a mileage method, and make sure that you're not doubling up on the deductions related to travel and the car expenses. So those are some of the things to just consider from a practical basis that will be helpful when we think about planning, in terms of planning going forward, as well as the data input once we have the actual income statement that we're going to be inputting, making sure that the categorizations for the travel are correct, and making sure that we don't have like personal stuff that's in the travel, that we narrow down the items for basically meals that would be appropriate as opposed to meals and entertainment, and seeing how the interplay might be if we have things that are related to the car that could be in the auto expense and the travel expenses. Now, although the 2020 Schedule C is out, we took some of this information from the Tax Guide for Small Businesses, and many of the instructions are not out yet for 2020. So we took the 2019 information, may have adjusted it for some information related to 2020, but note that the baseline information is coming from 2019 instructions and Tax Guide for Small Business. Note that you can find those things on the IRS website. The 2020 information and instructions should be out shortly. You can find them on irs.gov, irs.gov. Travel expenses. These are the ordinary and necessary expenses of traveling away from home for your business. You are traveling away from home if both of the following conditions are met. So again, we're traveling away from home, so we're kind of separating travel from basically around our business type of travel, and then the away from home type of travel, in order to be in compliance or to think about this categorization for deductibility of taxes. So your duties require you to be away from the general area of your tax home, defined later, substantially longer than an ordinary day's work. So you have longer than an ordinary day. Typically, you have that overnight principle. You'll typically hear people talking about, well, it's travel if you're overnight. You went somewhere overnight for a business purpose or business reason. 2, you need to get sleep or rest to meet the demands of your work while away from home. So again, kind of relating to that concept of if you're traveling, it's basically going to be an overnight activity, then and you have to stay somewhere, then it's probably going to be categorized as travel. So generally, your tax home is your regular place of business, regardless of where you maintain your family home. So the tax home, when we're thinking about the tax home place of business, that's different than where your family home is. So if you have like a long commute, or your family may live somewhere else for some reason or something like that. It includes the entire city or general area in which your business is located. You can see publication 463 for more information. The following is a brief discussion of expenses you can deduct. So we have the transportation. You can deduct the cost of travel by airplane, train, bus, or car between your home and your business destination. So again, if we're going travel now, so now we're thinking about the overnight travel. And so however we got there, plane, train, bus, and whatnot, we got the overnight travel. Now we got to be careful, of course, of the car, because again, you got to consider where you're including the deduction related to the car, whether you don't want to be doubling up between the mileage method and the deductions related to the car, whether you take the mileage method or not. And then over here on the travel area, so you got to be sure you're allocating properly between travel and the auto information. Also note that if you have, of course, both business and personal when you're going someplace, then that's gonna muddy up the deductibility of things like, of course, the transportation. So taxi, commuter bus, and limousine. You can deduct fares for these and other types of transportations between the airport or station and your hotel, or between the hotel and your work location away from home. So that would typically be deductible because it's going to be, part of the cost of the travel. Baggage and shipping, you can deduct the cost of sending baggage and simple or display material between your regular and temporary work locations. Car or truck, you can deduct the cost of operating and maintaining your vehicle while traveling away from home on business. You can deduct actual expenses or the standard mileage rate discussed earlier under car and truck expenses, as well as business-related tolls and parking. If you rent a car while away from home on business, you can deduct only the business use portion of the expenses. So you might have to rent a car. Again, if you have business and personal use, you have to allocate the business usage to possibly being the deductible portion. Meals and lodging. You can deduct the cost of meals and lodging if your business trip is overnight or long enough that you need to stop for sleep or rest to properly perform your duties. You can use the actual expense or standard meal allowance to calculate your deduction. So you could look up the standard meal allowance possibly to think about the deduction that way, or use the actual expenses. In most cases, you can deduct only 50% of your meal expenses. So we have that meals that could be categorized possibly limited to that 50% deduction, but you want to take a look at more detail if you have questions about that for the overnight travel, and you could take a look at see publication 463. You can find that on the IRS website at irs.gov for additional information there. Then we have the cleaning. You can deduct the cost of dry cleaning and laundry while on your business trip. So dry cleaning and laundry, important things there. You can deduct those. Telephone and tips could also possibly be items that could be deducted as well while part of the traveling process.